Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Friends, one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my journey is that when we come together with honesty, integrity, and goodwill, we can find solutions that are better than what any one person could have come up with on their own. And if there's anyone who embodies that belief, it's today's guests, Rob Fersh and Mariah Levison of Convergence. Now let me tell you, these two are champions of bridging divides and resolving conflicts in ways that don't just settle for middle ground, but actually aim for higher ground. Solutions that honor everyone's needs and values. Rob Fersh, the founder and senior advisor of Convergence, has been in the trenches of policy resolution for decades, working on everything from hunger in America to U.S. Muslim relations. His leadership in organizations like the Food Research and Action Center and Search for Common Ground has literally shaped the way that we tackle big issues in this country. And then we've got Mariah Levison, the current CEO and president of Convergence. Mariah's got this incredible knack for building trust and relationships across the most contentious divides. From running the Minnesota State Office of Collaboration and Dispute Resolution to teaching the next generation of mediators, she's all about conflict resolution and creating solutions that really stick. Together, Rob and Mariah co-authored a must-read book, From Conflict to Convergence, Coming Together to Solve Tough Problems, and today, they're here to talk about how we can all get better at listening, understanding each other's values, and finding those higher ground solutions, especially in a time when our society seems more divided than ever. But here's the kicker. They're not just talking to the leaders or the policymakers. They're even emphasizing the importance of engaging young people in this process. Because let's face it, friends, the future belongs to them. And it's crucial that they learn how to navigate these differences to build a more functional and civil society. So get ready, friends, because you're about to get some insights that could change the way that you think about conflict, resolution, and the power of coming together. Here we go. Rob Fersh and Mariah Levison, thank you so much for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am incredibly happy to see you all today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is. Thank you for having us. It's lovely to be here with you today.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. I was presented with the work that you do a little bit when I was at the Braver Angels convention in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet you guys in person there. But once we had that opportunity. Rob, to have that pre-conversation a couple weeks ago, and I found out more about the work that you guys do at Convergence. I got very excited about being able to have you on the podcast and talk with you about Convergence, talk with you about this book, From Conflict to Convergence, and really bring the tools from the work that you're doing to the DTH listeners. So again, thank you very much for joining me today. First, for the DTH listeners who may not be familiar with Convergence or the work that you guys are doing there, I know, Rob, you're one of the founders. So why did we start Convergence 15 years ago? That's a great place to start.
All right. Well, actually, I started working on it more like 26 years ago. And unlike Mariah, whose career has all been in conflict resolution, and she's very skilled and knowledgeable, I started out as an advocate. For one particular point of view, I thought morality itself demanded me to have certain points of view. But over time, I began to meet so many people who of great decency who wanted to solve problems, and they had no place to sit down and talk to each other. My history included working for 3 congressional committees and running a national anti-hunger organization. But over time, once again, I kept meeting people who made points I'd never thought of, who were genuine in wanting to solve problems, and had ideas I hadn't thought of. And they were kind enough at times to say they thought I had ideas they hadn't thought of. And a bell went off for me that we needed to bring people together with honesty and integrity, have them debate the issues or discuss the issues or dialogue on the issues, and push each other's thinking to higher ground. And so even though we didn't have, when I first started out over 20 years ago, the same level of toxic polarization we have in the country today, we had huge disagreements. If you look at people on either side of how to end poverty, how to deal with incarceration, how to fix healthcare, people, how to fix the K through 12 education system, people really were at odds. So my experience suggested to me that there was a missing piece in Washington and elsewhere where people who disagreed could come together, have conversations, build trust, and potentially find answers that were better than any of them had at the start. So that was the origin for starting Convergence, and we officially launched the organization in 2009.
In 2009. Very good. And then, Mariah, you're, as Rob said, you were all about conflict resolution. This is kind of how you got started. You started right off the bat. Unlike Rob and then myself, I mean, people know and they've heard me talking about, I was a more toxic person before, and then I gradually started to see the light, almost like Rob. But Mariah,
I'm not admitting to being toxic, though.
No. You don't have to admit to being toxic. I'm just saying I was toxic.
I was opinionated. Let's just say that I had opinions. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Very nice. Mariah, you were in conflict resolution prior to coming to Convergence then. So tell me a little bit about your background then.
Yeah, I'm a rare person who has spent my whole life's work in conflict resolution. I think something that was sort of unique about me is ever since I was little, it just seemed more obvious to me than maybe some other people that no matter what folks were doing, no matter how, maybe unproductive or even hurtful or harmful people's behavior might be, that mostly that was driven either by trying to address some fears or by, a sort of unskillful way to try to meet some of those basic needs that we all share for safety or security or belonging or a sense of efficacy. And seeing that so clearly for whatever reasons that I saw that made me think that there's a huge opportunity there to resolve conflict, that if we could come together and recognize that it wasn't about all this stuff that we were fighting about, but it was about uncovering what are these needs that are important to people that usually we all share, and that there were ways to, come up with solutions that meet the needs of everybody, that there was just a lot of missed opportunity there in bringing people together to solve conflict. And there's a story in the field of conflict resolution that gets told a lot that really illustrates that point, I think. People tell a story about these 2 kids who were in the kitchen, these 2 sisters, they were fighting over an orange, and they were yelling and they were screaming, and their mom finally got sick of it and came into the kitchen and grabbed a knife, cut the orange in half and gave them each half of an orange and said, I've had enough of it, now you each have half of an orange. And the 2 sisters, instead of being relieved and appreciative of their mom's great solution, were still just as upset. And through some conversation, they came to realize that the one sister needed the rind of the orange for, to create some zest for a baking recipe or something, and the other one needed the juice. And they could have, in fact, both had their needs met without having to, cut the orange in half or, split the difference. And that was just the way that I always saw it. Of course, that's a really oversimplified story, and on, big important public issues, it's more complicated, but I really think the heart of it is kind of that simple, that if we can understand what each person needs, there's a lot more opportunities to meet all of our needs than we sometimes think there is.
I think that's an absolutely beautiful example. I mean, I think that goes to a lot of the problems that we find in the world today is that people are too hung up on their maybe their own needs and their own animus towards the other side of the issue, that they don't stop to open up their minds to is there a better way? I mean, one of my favorite books of all time is the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And when I think of Stephen Covey's Win, Win or No Deal, and talking about synergize versus compromise, and really finding out what it is about the person, the seek first to understand, then to be understood. Find out what that person is looking for what's the end result that you are looking for? What's the end result that I am looking for? Is there a way that both of us can find what we need to get through this ugliness? But far too often we find that the ugliness overrides the whole conversation, and neither party's needs get met.
Right.
So let's take that to your guys' book, From Conflict to Convergence. I know that you guys have talked about, in collaborative problem solving and a higher ground, mutual gain solutions. How does that work? Because I love that simplified solution, that story and how that works. But I know that you guys have all kinds of solutions in this and tools in this to help people, whether it be business or communal or community organizations or our personal lives and things like that. So let's kind of dive into your book, From Conflict to Convergence.
Well, let me start, and then when it gets to the tough parts, I'll let Mariah take over. But I wanted to start by saying that I too love the Stephen Covey book. I read it at a time it was formative to my eventually starting Convergence. And I had the honor of working with Stephen directly. He was a participant in an early project I ran before starting Convergence on U.S. relations with the Muslim world. And he was terrific, and we even did an op-ed together. So I have utmost respect. And his concepts are, you've really nailed it. His concepts are very much in tune with the book. And in our book, I think, just for starters, we describe a whole series of ways in which people can begin to see each other as full human beings, not just as cardboard cutouts of a particular point of view, not just as adversaries. And it starts with talking about shared values. It talks about getting to know each other. It talks about spending time outside of the debate on policy itself. And when you understand that you have shared values, by and large, and in many cases, like Mariah said, really want the same things but disagree on how to get there, that can actually build trust that this other person's an authentic, genuine, sincere person. They just have a different point of view than you do. So we engage in a whole series of efforts before we even bring people to the table to discuss policy, to hear each other, understand each other's life stories, understand why their views became the way they did. And there's nothing quite like hearing directly from a person why they formed the views they did, rather than reading about it or just generalizing or stereotyping somebody just because of their background. And that begins to open people's hearts to each other. And I'm fond of saying that when hearts begin to open, then minds begin to open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's play off that a little bit, Mariah, because, I love the idea. One of the things that I promote so much is the idea of just having the conversation, getting the conversation started. And then once we do get the conversation started, not simply listening to just respond, but really trying to truly understand that person that you're having the conversation with. Before you even tackle the tough subject, the important part is to actually get the conversation started. So play off that a little bit, would you, Mariah?
Yeah, so I think, you're both right, that's the most important part, is those relational parts. It's figuring out what we have in common. It's figuring out all those shared goals and values that we have. And I think there's a lot of things today with our division that we would say, we believe in taking people's perspectives, or we believe we have shared goals or values, but when it's complex issues that are really close to our heart, we start to think, yeah, but not those people on the other side of that issue. They're just up to something. They're just, greedy or selfish, or they don't care about others. And we kind of forget some of that stuff that, we learned in kindergarten or whatever. But if we, we use these structures that help people, uncover that obscured hidden ground that they have. I mean, who doesn't want, a strong economy, good schools, who doesn't value, opportunity and kindness and fairness? When you've got that foundation, then you can drill down into what the solutions look like. And one piece of that drilling down, a thing that we do often, is in group settings, we help people often develop a shared vision of what they want the future of that issue to look like. So, for example, we recently did a project called Supports for Working Families. And that was about the idea that there's a pretty high level of agreement on the left and the right that it's too hard to raise a family in America today, but not enough agreement on what the solutions are, and not enough movement, on policy and, within companies to solve some of those challenges. And so we got this group together, a really ideologically diverse group, full range of thinking on these issues, and they thought there was no way they were going to be able to agree on things and come up with anything. And what they did first, what the facilitator in the process helped them to do, was to establish a shared vision, which was that they all agreed that families should flourish. And then they established some shared principles about what that meant. And so for them, that meant all basic needs are met, relational and community connectedness, resiliency in the face of challenges, and agency and choice. And so they all agreed with these big picture pieces. And then they were able, having that foundation, to drill down and figure out what are those specific solutions about paid family leave or tax credits or employer policies. So a piece of it is developing those win-win type solutions, or what we call higher ground solutions, is the relationship piece that Rob talked about, and then some of that developing a shared vision and shared principles.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when we think about a lot of our basic needs as human beings, we all have the same basic needs. Most of us have the same basic wants. Our value systems typically aren't that much different. But then there are these things that get in our way, and then sometimes there are subjects though, and contentious topics, as you guys talk about. I mean, these tough topics where we just aren't going to find common ground, but we can still have conversations about contentious topics where there's not going to be common ground, but we can do it in a civil way. So talk about that a little bit, would you, Rob?
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, sometimes you just can get to the point of at least being civil and having respect. But it's also surprising how some people who are polar opposites on certain issues can find ways to get some things done somewhat unexpectedly. Years ago, I worked at a group called Search for Common Ground, and I worked with a woman who had run a project on the issue of abortion. And it was clear that the people they brought to the table, this was at a time when there was some violence in abortion clinics and tensions ran high. This is probably the mid to late 1990s. It was clear that the people they were assembling them, some who, favored outlawing abortion, some who thought there needed to be choice, that there wasn't going to be agreement on that basic issue of principle. But what they found was a couple of things. One is that they shared other goals like teenage pregnancy prevention, better foster care and adoption systems, and they found they could work on that together. And in the course of hearing each other out and, again, understanding each other's values and why they reached the conclusions they did, they developed respect for each other's point of view rather than just antipathy. And they became friends in the process. And while they never did reach agreement on the fundamental issue, it's fine. They can still coexist. They can still respect each other. And they could still do a lot of things that were very good for society because they found ways to work together. So I think that's true for us. We've done that on a lot of issues. Mariah can speak perhaps to the guns and suicide project we did recently. But there again, we decided not to take on head-on the issue of gun control, but we sensed that people on either side of the gun issue were really alarmed and concerned at the high rate of death in the United States by guns, that is suicide by guns, and that, the success rate when you use guns as opposed to other means is much higher. So people were joined together and had a terrific conversation and came up with a whole series of ideas, ranging from where guns are kept and the safety of guns, and also mental health approaches, so that together they could reach that shared objective. And the people who came in, many of whom had never even talked to someone on the other side, became friends in the process, and really, they overcame a whole series of stereotypes they had about each other.
Oh, sure.
It's actually my experience that there are very few issues that we can't make meaningful progress on.
Right.
Very few. And just one example from a different project that we did on guns that really stuck with me was that we had people in the room who were talking about three kinds of gun violence, mass shootings and school shootings, suicide, often by veterans and happening more, rural parts of the country, and then gun deaths and, urban, more youth-driven kinds of crime. And the thing that all the participants were so united in was that all of those kinds of gun violence are driven by, they called it a brokenness in society. And I was really touched by that framing. And they said, no matter who, are perpetrating those acts of violence, it's all coming from this place of, brokenness and lack of community connection and mental health challenges and, lack of places where people gather. And, that's where they really wanted to focus. And they said, sure, regulation has its place and you need smart regulation and the right kind of regulation, but no regulation is fail-safe, no, fiscal policy, whatever. But that if we could focus all of our energies together on people's well-being, then, we would achieve, so many reductions of death by guns. And so I just think there's the places that are really hard to work out are really small. And there's so many places where we can come together and find smart solutions, even on our seemingly most divisive issues.
Sure. Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that brokenness part of this, and then tie that a little bit to what Rob said too about the fact that there are so many of us out here today, or so many people out among us today that look at people on the other side, or those other people, right? And they don't even realize how much they have in common with that person because they never actually stop to have that conversation with that other person, right? And I think that plays a lot into that brokenness. And then those stereotypes that you were talking about, Rob, that effective, polarization, the biases that we have towards those other people that we don't ever really know. And if we actually spent a little bit more time to get to know them, that would I think that would cure a lot of that brokenness. So I would like to dive a little bit more into that. Where did that brokenness start, and how did that and how do we turn it around? Because it's obviously we have become more broken as a society now than we were in previous generations. Where do you two fall on this? And I'll start with you, Rob. Where do you fall on this? How did that brokenness get started?
Well, look, I can't pretend I'm an expert on brokenness, so I have some answers that are probably, fairly obvious about the larger forces at work. And there's a lot of attention being paid to loneliness. Robert Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone, must be about a quarter century or so ago. But if you look at, changes in demographics and people having to move and the hollowing out of certain rural communities and not having the institutions where people can create connection and feel part of things. If you add to that the galvanizing and polarizing role of social and other media, which some people are what Amanda Ripley calls conflict entrepreneurs, heightening people. If you're not doing well, then you, I think, are probably more subject to people on the left or right who've got simplified solutions and are criticizing the other side and not giving them the benefit of the doubt, which is a big part of what we suggest. So I just think there are a lot of factors that contribute to brokenness. But what I'd also say to you is that when people enter our rooms, whether they're broken or not, they're often deeply, deeply divided. And they can't imagine even talking to each other in many cases, no less working together. And we got some favorite stories about that. I'll just tell one really quickly, because it was really a tense meeting the first day. We did a project on reentry of people from prison into society. And we had two people in the room who we knew were polar opposites. One was an academic who'd written a book very critical of the prison system at writ large, and especially of private prisons. And we had a senior executive from the largest private prison system in the country. And we, wanted them to talk to each other. And it's funny because they had a first day in which people got to know each other, and then we often just make sure they break bread at night. So, of course, we purposely sat the academic critical of private prisons next to the executive from the private prison system. And it's in our book. And it's funny, he said, oh, God, I walked into the room, I saw where my nameplate was. I'm going to sit next to the private prison guy. I texted my wife and said, you can't believe who they've got me sitting next to tonight. I'm not looking forward to it. And of course, by the end of the night, they discovered they wanted the same things for people who got out of prison. They wanted them to thrive. They wanted them not to be in the justice system again. They wanted to have good health care and good mental health and community. And then the guy from private prisons pointed out that his company had diversified. They now ran reentry programs. So this stereotype that all private prisons, and I'm not here to debate whether private prisons are a good idea or not, the stereotype that private prisons are in it to keep people in prisons longer to make more money was sort of upended by his acknowledgement that, yes, they really wanted to help people get out of prison. And not only that, they're going into business to help people thrive when they got out. And so by the end of the dinner, the academic had agreed to go to Tennessee and visit the private prison that the gentleman was from. And now they are actually working together to improve systems within prisons. They've formed a very collegial professional relationship that exists to this day. And they acknowledge that very freely in our interviews with them for the book.
That is so fantastic. I mean, I absolutely love stories about that. And that's another thing I love. I haven't had a chance to read your book, but one of the things that I have seen from the book is the real world solutions, the stories that you guys bring to the table, and in so much of this work that we do, this depolarization work, this conflict resolution work, that is what is sorely needed, is more of these real life stories that really show people that this is possible. Because I can't tell you how many times that I've had these conversations with people, and I start talking to them about depolarization, and they're like, no, that'll just never work. I mean, you can't bring this person that believes this and this person believes that. You can't bring them together and actually make something productive out of that. But Mariah, we know that that's not true. We've seen it, right? I mean, we've seen plenty of times that this is not the case. It can happen. That's
right. And really, it's not easy to write a book, in case for listeners who haven't written a book, it's a lot of work. But it was one of the things that really motivated Rob and I, is that we feel really blessed that day in and day out, we get to see that not only does it work, but it works pretty reliably. I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy, but certain things, we do kind of the same things over and over again because they really reliably bring people together. And we really wanted to share that message of hope, that we're not academics or whatever, we're practitioners. We do this, and we wanted Americans to know that it works, and also to share some tools of things that have worked for us so that hopefully other people can apply those approaches in their communities and their organizations so that they can have those experiences of seeing that it works too.
Absolutely. And that's what I wanted to bring in as a beautiful segue, is I want to bring in and start talking about some of those tools that people can use in their own lives, whether it be business or their family or their community, wherever. What are some of the tools that we can find in here, Rob, that people can take away from this and really use it to help in their own, interpersonal situations that are causing them grief and causing trouble for them?
Yeah, well, thanks to that, Wilk. And there's a whole bunch of tools in the book, and I'll try to cover a few, and then hopefully Mariah can fill in whatever I'm forgetting. But because we've got a very nice response. A lot of people feel like they can apply it to their own personal lives and their professional lives right away. So it starts in some ways with yourself. It's important for you to try to deal with your own fears and insecurities and perhaps misimpressions of others and stay open-hearted and open-minded. So getting yourself centered to begin with, not, as you said before, not getting ready to just debate and answer, but to listen carefully and understand each other. So just getting yourself settled is an important first step. After that, there's lots of other tools we use. We have a chapter, I think it's called Curiosity is the Cure. So learning to ask questions. And your colleague at Braver Angels, Monica Guzman, has that as a centerpiece of her book. So learning just not to just react automatically or dismiss people, right, but to ask questions, get curious, learn more about why that person's has the views that person does. That's a tool that helps disarm, asking really good questions, and not in an antagonistic way, but in a way because you really want to find out. Adopting a mindset of, as I said before, giving other people the benefit of the doubt. And frankly, one of my big, sermons is that it actually works. When you practice the golden rule, it's not about just being nice. It's not just something you do in your house of worship or amongst your family. It's actually effective in solving problems. And I'm so disappointed that when it comes to politics and oftentimes policy discussions, that the golden rule seems to stop at the water's edge of when you enter them. And instead, when you treat others like you'd like to be treated, you're likely to bring out their best, you're likely to learn something, and you're likely then to be able to go someplace with the conflict you have. You may not resolve it. It may be that it's irresolvable, but more often than not, I think people want to take care of each other. Whether it's a minor issue like dogs barking outside your house, as mine was this morning, it's early, my neighbor, or whether it's something much more major. No, it wasn't my neighbor barking, it was his dogs. But
right.
Anyway, I just started to give you some of the tools, and Mariah, perhaps you can bail me out with some more and better advice.
Well, one tool I always name is sort of where we started the conversation about that, higher ground or win-win problem solving. We used to say win-win, back to Stephen Covey, but then that got made fun of a lot on TV shows, like The Office and things like that. So it sounded too simplistic to people. So we talk about higher ground problem solving. And some of it's the mindset and some of it's kind of a tool to apply. So I think one thing that really helps people is going in to try to solve problems across difference, to not think I'm going to have to compromise my values. Sometimes there's some compromising about the little stuff, but to have this mindset that I don't have to compromise values and principles to solve big problems. So just thinking, okay, there's another way. It's possible to understand these needs that are driving people, and then to come up with solutions that really, bring those together and integrate them, and that those solutions, might be, wiser and more durable solutions than anybody would come up with on their own anyway. And so there are really specific tools in the book about how do you do that? How do you uncover what other people's needs are? A lot of that is some of the stuff Rob already touched on around listening, asking good questions, and then how do you, develop solutions that, meet as many of the needs of people who care about these issues as possible. So to me, that's one of the most powerful tools in the book.
Mm-hmm. No, and I absolutely love the idea, Mariah, that you bring up of it's and I don't know if I've heard so many people that just for whatever reason can't get their mind around the concept of you don't necessarily compromise your own beliefs and principles by listening to somebody else's. If you just listen and just the act of listening is not a means of compromising your own values and principles, but it may lead to something much, much bigger down the road. And I think if more people understood that, we would get a lot further, because like you were saying, Rob, there are too many, I guess, forces, and I'm going to say it in my words and not necessarily yours, but there's too many forces out there that are looking to keep us divided for whatever reason. And in Yascha Monk's book, How Democracies Fail, I think that's the name of the book. I just finished it not too long ago. But, he talks about it's extraordinarily easy to make people hate each other if you can keep them divided. And if we continue to hate each other, or if we continue to stay divided, we will continue to hate each other. And there's way too many problems out there in the world today that we just will not conquer them if we remain divided. That's why I love organizations like Convergence and Braver Angels and the Pro Human Foundation. You know, all these different organizations that I am blessed enough to get to work with and encounter and engage with, and doing this work of actually bringing us together rather than tearing us apart. So let's kind of take this home, take this conversation home. Tell the DTH listeners where they can find out more about the book, or more about Convergence, first of all. Then, Mariah, let's talk where they can find the book, From Conflict to Convergence. And then we'll close up our conversation. We're not arguing today. Yeah. No, it has been a beautiful conversation, and I think if more people understood the tools that they can find in this book, the world's going to be a better place, and that's what we're here to do.
Well, we would love for listeners to come learn more about Convergence. We have a website, convergencepolicy.org, and there's lots of stuff on there, but the place that I would point people to is there's like a ways to engage with us page, and there's a lot of ways to engage with us. There's resources there that folks can find. We have e-learnings and other tools. You can also find more about the book there, but we hope that more folks will engage with us, that we can share more of these tools and give folks, again, the confidence that we have more in common than it seems, and that we can solve our shared problems together without compromising our values and principles, and that will be a virtuous cycle enabling us to do this more easily. And the book is available all the places where you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, and there's information about it on the website too.
Absolutely. More in common than it seems. Rob, take us home, man. What do you got to close with for the DTH listeners?
Well, I got a couple of points I want to make, and they're a little bit separate, but one thing I want to say is that if you do the kind of work we do, it's not just that you solve a problem in the short run, but you transform relationships in the long run. You achieve what we call radiating impacts. So these people, as I mentioned, the people who worked on prisons, they become friends and colleagues over years, and it's true in virtually every project. And I simply say that when people work on something together, like solving a problem, I'm all for the dialogue, and I think what Braver Angels does is fantastic. But when you actually work to solve a problem, the bonds run often deeper, and it's a great way to depolarize society. And the last point I want to make is that we're very interested in getting to young people. What you said before, reminded me that I wanted to make this point. That between kids growing up on screens and not necessarily having the same social interactions, Jonathan Haidt's written about this. Add to that the pandemic that separated people and has now permanently left some people not really in close contact with others. We really need to do a lot more to try to get through to young people about different mindsets that they can have, how to deal with people who are different from them, people they haven't had direct experience with. I've had the honor of being a guest lecturer in a class at a community college in Indiana, Ivy Tech, a number of times over the last few years. And the professor there says, a lot of them are younger people, and they're blue or they're red, and they don't really know each other, and we just need to break open how they think about each other. So that's really what this is about. It's about a mindset. It's about being curious. It's about giving people the benefit of the doubt and treating people the way all the major faiths suggest we treat each other, not just to be nice, but to get things done. And that's really what our book is about, is creating a more functional society and probably a more civil society in the process.
Well, we certainly need a more functional and a more civil society than we have today. We do have more in common than it seems. I love the idea of getting in front of more of the young people. That's why I love organizations like Bridge USA. I see that Manu Meal sits on, another good friend of mine sits on the board of directors for Convergence. His organization, Bridge USA, is doing phenomenal work with the younger crowd in colleges and I believe even some in high schools today. So yeah, showing people there is a better way, showing people that we do have more in common than it seems, showing people that there is a better and more civil way to discuss contentious topics, giving them those tools and really building those those radiating impacts and showing people that there's a better way that we can move forward together is incredible. Rob Fersh, Mariah Levison, Convergence, you guys are fantastic. Convergencepolicy.org. We will look forward to doing a lot more collaboration with you guys in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and get to have such a lovely conversation together.
Agreed, Wilk. You're so skillful. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.